When I woke up this morning and I heard it raining, I went running out to get my tools, my garden tools and everything, and I put them away. And oh,
I don't know what time it was this morning. I woke up and I heard the
oh,
thunder and grabbed my tobacco and came running outside.
Well, good
So,
morning, everyone, and good afternoon. We are now live, and I'm so grateful that you guys have joined us. And thank you too for putting that tobacco out for that you were mentioning, and for the thunders and the rain. It's been absolutely a wonderful, wonderful day, and especially I like the rain too when things have happened and you're kind of feeling like very anxious and stuff like that. I'll go outside or I'll go for a car ride, and I just feel that the rain just kind of washes things away. And so that's why I love the rain, just because we can just kind of use those metaphors of like it's coming and is giving us new life, right? And new and washing us with goodness and light and being in this space. And anyhow, I know that nobody came here to listen to me, but but welcome. I'm just so thrilled that both of you are able to be here with us. And I know Jody is en route to her place for the weekend. And sometimes that young lady needs to just take a break. And so I'm just filling in for Jody for today, and I will let you guys, both you and Tehehanteh, to have a conversation. So welcome, Renee, and welcome, Tehehanteh.
thank you very
yeah.
much. I was just wondering what was the subject that was advertised for today? Uh, I guess she didn't hear that. Anyway, um, today, what I'd really like to talk about is I'd like to talk about what has what has happened since between history and now, because the previous talks that I had gave something of a description of the kind of philosophy that we have
Mhm.
and how that philosophy now um, is still coming up against the same sort of situation that we've seen all along since contact, really. And the other thing that's really interesting is that we were just talking a few minutes ago about what's happening with finding the children in British Columbia and Kamloops. And the only good thing that's coming out of that we can actually see, well, actually, a couple of things in sort of an abstract way, is that this is going to finally, once all of these residential schools, and I think there's something like, what was it, 100 and 130, 147 or something like that. There's quite a few anyway, locations that similar things happened. We know the same thing happened right here at Six Nations with the mush hole. And the sad fact is that until we find these missing children, then this wound is still not able to, we say, knit it together. In other words, heal the wounds, heal the trauma that this is all caused from. So I'd like to take a quick run across history to bring us to this point right now to say, where are we going? Where are we going with our intentions as original people? And where is the settler society going with their understandings? And so I think we just need to do a quick run through with that, so that many people that I speak to, well-educated people, they always ask me the same thing. Well, we really don't understand is the first thing. And then what is it that we can do? And I'm going to put this right up at the front so everyone has an idea of where I'm going with this little time that we have together. And that's it. That's this. And it goes back to the time before contact we talked about. So in the old country, and I know there was the major ones, like for instance, Great Britain, and of course France, and of course Spain. Those were the ones that were out and about on the seas looking for new places. And once they did find, shall we say, when we discovered Columbus here on this land, he was a little bit more than lost, really, because the term that we have come with or come to understand as he thought he was in the Indies. So that's where the term Indians came from. And so we need to understand that we were many nations, we are many languages, our cultures are not exactly the same. We have different ceremonies and on and on and on. We're just totally different people. The interesting thing is all of our nations, all of our original nations, are based on a single philosophy. Even though we have different ways of talking about it and explaining what it is, explaining our cultural ways of ceremonies and all of that is really not that important, except to know that they're distinct and they're beautiful. Our languages are totally different. They're not related except for certain groups that have similarities between their language. So each being separate, our underlying philosophy is all about ecology. It's all about sustainability. It's all about caring for each other and ensuring that the other has what's necessary. And basically, I would say how we lived and how some of us still do live, it goes like this. If one person starved, then everyone starved. Which means that everyone was equal. We shared equally. We did everything that we could to ensure everyone's safety and well-being. We had a complete governmental system. We had a system of sustainability. And that sustainability is all about making sure that whatever we took, we would do something that would replace that. In other words, always ensure that something was going to continue. In other words, not to overfish an area, not to overhunt an area, not to take all the medicines from that area, not to take all the fish from the waters, and on and on and on. That's what it was all about. As a matter of fact, before contact, and even a little bit afterwards, the way we lived is that we would move our village and the entire village after maybe between 20 and 25 years. So that area could replenish. So the lands that were dedicated to farming and planting, they would regenerate on their own. They would allow everything, all the underbrush and all that to go back up. So in, say, 250 years, when we came back to that same location, the majority of the undergrowth had all come back to life again, and it repropagated itself. The land refertilized in a natural way, and we revillagized that particular area. And by that time, all the fish would be plentiful again, all the game would be plentiful again, and we didn't scare the fish away, we didn't scare the animals away. We did it in a very quiet, respectful way. And so now we get to the point of, we say, contact. And when contact occurred, what we noticed immediately, and this happened, I guess, most poignantly, it'd be in the area of the Hudson River. And this is going back to the turn of the century, 1600. So we all point to a date around 1613 when we see the two-row wampum that we talk about so much, and the importance of why that came to be. And it was because of observance, and it just happened to be the Dutch were the first ones that were moving up into that area. And so that's where all our villages were located as well. Not all of them, but some of them. As I said, we were migratory in nature. And what was noticed at the time immediately is, of course, we had a language barrier at the beginning with the settlers. And that language barrier prevented us from really having deep conversations about anything. But we did realize, because what we observed as original people is that the settlers had a totally different mindset towards environment than we did.
Mm-hmm.
And they came in, and they brought their boats, and they brought their whiskey, and they brought all of their goodies with them, and they started settlements. And our understanding was that when Columbus arrived, he arrived in a very, very bad state. His crew were dying. They had scurvy, literally, and we had, our philosophy says that we take care of people. That's exactly what we did. We fed them, we gave them medicine, we brought them back to health, and then they started bringing their settlers. And their settlers, their friends, didn't know anything about living in this country. And they thought they would just basically replicate how they had lived in their homelands. And understanding that they were escaping their homelands because conditions were so poor there. So Great Britain, France, and Spain, they all had the same kind of, I'm not going to call it democracy, but shall I say ways of government, which has to do with domination, basically. So you had the ruling classes. You had your kings and your queens and your duchesses and all the rest of those royalty type people, the people with the money. And they were the ones that were in rule, and they made the rule for everybody else. So if you were a serf, for instance, basically what you had to do, you were a servant. You had to pay so much to the crown or your monarchy or whatever your system of government was to support them. They held all the precious things, all the precious metals, all the wealth, all the land, and all so forth. And so the people that were on the land, the people that were still in touch with the land, knew how to work with the land. They were all the people that were subjugated. They were the ones that had to feed everybody else. They did all the labor. They did all the hard work. And so it was not a very good condition, because this is basically oppression of like against like. In other words, Spanish against Spanish, British against British, and so forth, French against French. And they built up their class systems that way. So now, when these settlers now find out that they can escape, and or some of them are actually criminals that were banned from their own country and then came here as well. They arrived here in a situation where they didn't know how to live off the land. They didn't know what crops grew here. They brought their own kind of, shall I say, potatoes, meat and potatoes kind of thing with them. And they thought it would work here. Well, it didn't work nearly as well as what it did back in their country, because it was already organized. But here, It was a pristine country. And it had to be the original people that then showed them how to live, showed them what kind of medicines were here, showed them how to take that to be able to heal themselves and to become well again. And in the meantime, what they started doing is they started their colonization. They started building, they started clearing land, they started building their houses. And these were like permanent type houses. And we never had fences before. And so this was their way of fencing things off and to say, this is private property kind of thing. Not to mention the fact that they were clear cutting, destroying all the natural habitat in the area. The land was becoming used up because they didn't have proper ways of refertilizing the land, so the land was going poor. They were overfishing, they were overhunting. They had their boomsticks, what we call them, or fire sticks, we call them, and those were their guns. So they didn't have to get very close to the game to bring them down. Not only that, they would make a big racket and chase all the other animals away from the area just because of the racket they were making. And we, as original people, noticed this difference. And we said, we've got to have an agreement here on how we're going to live together. We're not asking them to leave, but on the same hand, what we are asking for is we're asking for them to respect the land, respect the forest, respect the animals, respect the insects, respect how the fishing are. And if you're going to deplete them, then you better figure out how you're going to do that in a sustainable way. And so we said that we had to have an agreement. And of course, the Dutch, they did agree because they had their own ideas as well. So at first it was, now by the year 1613, we were able to communicate with each other. We were learning each other's languages. And so we were able to communicate. So during this communication process, the Dutch were saying, this is how it's going to be. This is how our relationship should be. We're going to make up this document, make a declaration, and we're going to say that we being the settlers, that we're going to act as your parents. We're going to look after you, and you're going to be our children. And we heard that, and we said, no, that's not the way things are. Here's how the relationship is going to be. And we insisted, you, in fact, are in our home. This is our home. This land is our home. This sky over the top, this is our roof. This is our way of living. This is our understanding that how we not only survive, but thrive here. We look after each other. We didn't have things like jails and all of those things that the Europeans brought with them. But one would think that they would have that understanding that they came from a society that in fact had dominated them. And they brought that same mentality with them when they came here. And so they thought that it would be the same. So they basically wished to subjugate everybody else, which happened to be the original people that were already here, already had civilizations, already had a trade network, already had our own economy system. We had our own way of doing things, and it worked very well. Because like I said, if one person starved, we all starved. That means when there's plenty, we all shared in that plenty. We all fended for each other, so each person had a good life. And we had our own governmental system as well. So we had a societal system that was based on love, We had a governmental system that was based on democracy, a true democracy. I don't know if I'll have time to talk about that democracy model today. That's a whole section of its own, but it's all based on equality. It's all based on this principle that we stand in a circle and that no one person stands above anyone else. Everyone has a talent, everyone contributes to that, and we all have responsibilities. In other words, we all, after we grow up and past the puberty age, get to an age of understanding where your vocation has already been chosen for you. You are chosen for your talents. If you had an affinity towards botany or anything like that, anything to do with plants, you were placed in that position to be able to develop that talent so that you would become the expert on medicines, for instance, or the expert on how to produce good agriculture, and on all the different things that we had to do. If you were trained to be a hunter, you became the master hunter, and you were the one that then helped everyone else to learn how to do that in a respectful, a proper way, and it was sustainable. We didn't take all the game, only took what we needed. So now here we are, we're going through this understanding, and we said, here's how it's going to be. So we made this wampum, and we used this wampum as our contract, our record of what the agreement was. And the agreement was this. We said, here we are. We use a metaphor, and we said, we're all going through this life. We're going through down this river together. You came in your ship, and your ship we recognize as all of your people. All of your people, you have your own ways of worship. You have your own ways of thinking about your deities. You have your own governmental system. And you have your own ways of managing how that operates. And so all of these things, you put them all together, and we are not here to say that you're going to be subjugated to our ways of doing things, but we do expect you to be respectful of our home, because this is what we are sharing with you. So now we also have our own ways of understanding of deity, of the energies and how the energies operate, because we don't even have a word for religion. This is a way of life. This is the philosophy, is the way of life. It's a respectful way of living. It's a way that makes sure that things continue, gets replenished, and we all share in those resources. And we've invited you to live here and share these same resources. But we need you also to share those laws of how those resources are to be regenerated. And so that's our way of understanding. And so we wish you to respect our ways of governance, and we will equally respect your ways of governance. We're not going to get into your ship and try to steer your ship for you. And so likewise, that respect means that you are not to get into our canoe and tell us how to conduct our way of doing government, our way of believing, our relationship with the earth, the universe, and all of ecology. We're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're saying this is a river, this is a treaty of respect. And so this respect needs to continue. And so that was our understanding, that we're not to get into each other's ships and move on. So that situation goes on for some time until we get to much later on, and I need to do some quantum leaps in time So that's at the very beginning of contact, our understanding, and trying to reach a way of moving forward together so that we all benefit. Because there's plenty of resources here, but we expect to be sharing in those resources. So now all our ways of doing things continued. And so we found new ideas started to come in. And one of the things, and I'm not exactly sure how it started, but the settlers found out there was a huge resource here in the way of furs. And certainly in Great Britain, they really cherished the fur of the beaver because that's what they used to make their felt hats with, their fedoras and their, it was a big hit. And so were the furs, making these fur things that they would wear around their their shoulders. And so the settlers then said, well, you people know how to hunt, and we have all of these things that would make your life so much easier, like knives and axes and even guns. And so we were introduced to a way of thinking that we never had considered before. Now, we did realize that having a knife was much better than using a piece of stone. And, on and on. And having pots and pans was a lot easier than making our own pottery to be able to cook with. All these things that made our life easier, we thought were very, very valuable and good for competition. It would put us ahead of other Native nations here on our very own land. So what that introduces this idea of greed. In other words, we want to get more beaver than everybody else so that we can get the guns first and we can get the knives first and we can, forward ourselves. Not realizing that this idea of trade was very detrimental because we had to put aside our basic philosophy. Now we're at the point where we were taking way more than what we needed. Basically, the beaver was our currency. It was providing us all of these modern conveniences that we thought would be beneficial. And in fact, what it did is it caused greater conflict with other nations because they wanted to get these knives and these axes as well, metal ones. They wanted the pots and pans as well. And so now it became a competitive thing. So we were seduced by this idea of commerce. And this idea of commerce really hasn't gone away because that's what we're still dealing with today. We're dealing in the same way of commerce. So now what we're doing here is we're changing our values as original people without even realizing it. So I want to go into treaties next because treaties, originally that was a treaty. So these treaties up until around the 1800s were all about peace and friendship and equality. That's what they were all about. It's like, how are we going to peacefully coexist with each other? Well, in the 1800s, the tone, the overtones and the undertones, the undercurrents, shall I say, of treaty were all based on resource. It had something to do with the trees on the land, it had something to do with the minerals of the land, it had something to do with the land itself. It was all about giving up rights and giving up territories to be able to live peacefully. And that was never our original intention. And so again, later on, we have this idea that the government has to put a stronghold on here because it has to figure out, and I'm talking about the government of Canada at the time, or that form of government that resulted from the British being here. This is after the wars, even though we had fought on wars for the British. We did, in fact, become allies. And it was eventually how we were given this tract of land here along the Grand River, 6 miles on either side of the river, from its source to its mouth, because we had in fact lost all of our territories in the wars between the English and the French. Basically, they signed a treaty with each other, and they didn't tell us as their allies, because it was the Mohawks that sided on the side of the British. Again, when we sided on the side of the British at that time, we broke our sacred allegiance to our own confederacy. Mm-hmm. Because in that pact, our part of it was that we were not to take sides of any other alien nations. So in other words, we were 5 nations that were tied into a league of nations that were to look after each other's back in the time of warfare. And in fact, we were at war at that time. We were being invaded by the English and the Frenches at the same time. And we thought it would be better perhaps to then take a side, because they were promising us that we would lose our land if we didn't side with somebody. We sided with the British, and in fact, when they signed the peace treaty, they didn't tell us. They didn't tell all our troops. They didn't tell our warriors that were all out helping them in the war field that they had signed a peace treaty. Simultaneously, it was Washington that realized that this was a golden opportunity. All the warriors were out in the war fields, and what a perfect time to take over all the villages. So basically, they gathered 7,000 troops, marched across Iroquois, or what's known as the Iroquois, our 5 nations area right across the United States, from the bottom of Lake Erie all the way over to the Mohawk River. And they took 7,000 troops, destroyed everything in their path, burned down all the villages, took out literally billions of bushels of corn, because we had stashes of corn. As a matter of fact, the territory of Senecas was called the bread basket, is because that's where all the main sources of the corn were kept. It was a trade item. It was a huge trade item. We couldn't possibly use that many bushels of corn just between our territories. They were all destroyed. All the orchards were cut down. The women and children that were left in the villages basically had to run away with whatever they could carry. Unfortunately, there weren't many people that were killed, because we always had scouts to tell us what was going on. They ran away, and that's what allowed the United States, or the 13 colonies at the time, to then round us all up and put us on what they called a reservation. We were starving, we had no food, we had no clothing, we had no resources, we had no homes. We were decimated, and we never recovered from that. But the British did promise us that they would take care of us, because we had fought along with them. And so the Haldeman deed was the result of that promise, and that was the grant. I'm not going to go into the details of how they acquired it, but the fact is, this was a grant. Having said that, meanwhile, the government of Canada, or shall we say the colonistic government of Canada at the time, then decides that it needs a way to now keep us, um, or to further separate us from our lands and resources. So they took that advantage and they created what was called the Indian Act. So what the Indian Act did is it took over 100% of all our activities. It confined us to strict areas of containment so that we were placed in one particular area and confined. The entirety of our lifestyles were then dictated to us. And I can really not go into all the details of that confinement. But that confinement had to do with everything. It controlled our travel. It controlled what we could buy, what we could sell, how we would live. And then the Indian Act then took the next step that said it had to have its own policing system to deal just with the Indian situation. So they then created the what's now known as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and that was their sole duty, was to contain, control, and police the Indians. In other words, make sure that they did exactly what they were doing. Make sure that they could not travel unless they had special permission from the Indian agent, and on and on and on. The entirety of our way of life was controlled. We could not have lawyers, and it goes on and on of all the things that we were not allowed to do. And that was then also approximately the time that we see the first residential schools. And the idea that the government had, the Canadian government, I don't know if it was a true government, it wasn't an independent government at the time, but they then decided that it would be in the best interest, into their best interest, as if they could take the Indian out of the Indian. In other words, civilized. They believed that we were uncivilized people. And with that, they said the only way that we can do that is we're going to educate them. And we're going to take their children. And that's exactly what they did. And they did that, and they convinced our people that this is a good way, that you learn these ways of the settler, because this is the way it's going to be in the future. And initially, we thought that was not a bad idea, because we realized that the world was changing in a very quick way into ways that we had no way of controlling. We had no ways of controlling the influx of people that was coming in, the number of lands that they were occupying. We couldn't possibly protect it all. And so we thought, yeah, that's a good idea that we educate our children. And we were promised that they were going to learn like things of trade and things that would be useful to us. That when they returned from their education, they would come back to the home community and help us with our agriculture, our way of doing business. In other words, blending in with society, or the society that was developing. And so what they did is they didn't tell us the hidden agenda. The hidden agenda was, in fact, assimilation. The residential schools literally beat the children so that if they found them speaking their own language. So they had to learn the English language. They had no choice. They had to go to their chapels and learn all about their ways of worship, if you will, their ways of religion. So what they were telling us at the time was that our language was no good, It was not going to help us out. It was evil. Our ceremonies were evil and not worthless. And this continued for a very long time. I'm not even going to go into the years, but it was 1970 was the last time that a residential school was in full operation. That was its extent. And so now you have 150,000 children over a period of, I don't know how many years, that were collected and put through that system, so that when they left, they had no connection to their culture. They had very little connection to their family. They had very little connection with how they were to even behave in a family. And so they lost the heart piece, I call it. They didn't know how to raise children. They didn't know how to love. They were totally separated so that they couldn't pass that on when they had children. And so we have dysfunctionality. We have a loss of language. The people that went through those residential schools refused to teach their children our language because they didn't want their children to go through the same humiliation that they went through when they were going to school. And then, of course, we also realize all the atrocities that happened. We still don't know the extent of it. We do to some degree, but this is hardly ever been taught in schools. And the fact is, it's pretty much the same way now. It's only recently that we've had a little bit of opportunity to now have this exposed. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing these children in Kamloops, 215. Well, that was just the count from the ground penetrating radar. It's likely that they'll find more because the digging is going on as we speak. And now we're seeing that these same things are going on elsewhere. There are other schools, and they're starting to look for children in their schools as well, in their school grounds. And isn't it ironic? Is this a normal thing that a school has a burial ground? Any school has a burial ground, and we don't know how many are there. Conveniently, they say they've lost a lot of records. Conveniently, we also know that the churches are still holding on to records that they refuse to release. This is a fact. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring us around to a point where we understand where we are today. So these are the yesterday things that has caused trauma amongst every indigenous, and I don't like the word use indigenous, but that's an English word. I like to call it original people. Mm-hmm. All of these communities of original people, every single community has been affected in the same way. Now, does that not sound like somebody else is jumping into our canoe and telling us how we're going to run our societies? Yes, that's exactly what it means. And why is that acceptable? You know, we spend literally billions of dollars helping other nations as Canadian people, and we don't even look in our own backyard to ensure that people have adequate housing, clean water, and an opportunity for a future. So this is the state that we are in to this very day. And I want to talk about a couple of things because you hear a lot in the news, maybe not too much now, only the sensational things, about demonstrations about land, about what's happening over in British Columbia again, where they're trying to put in a pipeline in through pristine forests, forests that has absolutely unique diversity. And that unique diversity is just slushed off as being, oh, well, it's just, it's progress. It has to happen. No, it doesn't have to happen. The fact is, the real facts is the Chinese are heavily invested in the tar sands development. There's a contract that says that Trudeau has to get this out, or some government leader has to get this out. They promised. And they signed, we don't know what kind of agreement they signed, but that's what the big push is. We are being taken over by foreign interests. It all has to do with capitalism. And that's the fact, and that's what we're fighting. But at the same hand, here we are as original people. We're being criminalized for trying to protect the things that we know helps, not just helps, it's the only thing that keeps us alive. It's the land that keeps us alive. It's the water that keeps us alive. It's the air that we breathe. It's all being poisoned. I can go into specifics about other things, but what I want to do is I want to give you some understanding about why we are defending our land. We're defending our land, in short, because of out and out blatant fraud, and we can prove it. We've got all the paperwork that we need that proves it. But the government right now, at the point where we are, 2021, doesn't want to talk to us. I wonder why. The fact is, in my own local territory here, this is the second reclamation that we've seen go on. The first one is not solved yet. It was taken over by the province. The province bought out the developer. And we have, again, we have the history. We have the paperwork. We have the proof that shows that we never sold that land. Mm-hmm. And yet they continue to try to justify with the use of the OPP and their, RCMP, whatever forces that they need to keep what doesn't belong to them. We have needs as well, too. And you look across this country and you see of all the mining that has gone on, all the clear-cut forest that's been gone on, all the other mining that's gone on in this country that produces literally billions of dollars for the government and for private industry, and we don't get 1 cent out of that. I'll take that back. Du Bois did make some sort of tiny concession, and we do get a tiny portion of it, but not everyone, just that local community. And the fact is, if we talk about resources, what was our agreement? The agreement was that we would share. There's no sharing going on. As a matter of fact, it's 99.8% of all lands are now occupied by the Canadian government. And you think you own your land? You don't really, because they say the underlying title is Crown. Where did that come from? Go way back to the Royal Proclamation, way back in the day, when they just said, oh, this is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery says, oh, you aren't using the land, so therefore it's ours. In logic, how logical is that? It only can be logical if you have an army to back you up and say, that's the law. That's their law, right? That's the settlers' law. That's the colonists' law. It's not our law. Can't just override a constitution. We have a constitution. By international law, when we put together the League, the 5 nations, the League of Peace, we formed a constitution 600 years or more before anyone came over here to discover this continent. And under international law, any existing constitution cannot be overridden by any other constitution. And that's exactly what's going on here. And that's just the background of who we are. It doesn't seem to matter how fair you are. As far as we're concerned, we've been totally fair. And we've never broken any treaty. On the other hand, all the treaties that you made about all the lands that you've acquired, you're fighting amongst yourselves now how to divide that up. And I'm talking about settlers, colonists, people that are not original people. The way of thinking is totally different. So what do we do today to be able to make amends? I'd say, firstly, we've got, legally speaking, there's been laws that have been made in Canada that tries to keep the stolen lands. You know, according to law, if no money exchanges, there's no sale. And that's exactly what we see. We see it over here with the meadows. That's under contention right now. That is a long story of fraud again. And even the courts don't know what the truth is. I have investigated an amicus report that happened when Douglas Creek was going on, the occupation there. And according to that amicus and the research that they did, what an amicus is, if anyone doesn't know what it is, it's an independent study from other lawyers and researchers to find out what the truth is so that it goes in front of the judge. And the judge has a background of what the lawyers are arguing about. In this amicus report, I think that was, not sure what year that was. Anyway, it was during the Douglas Creek estate, so that would have been 2007, somewhere in there. That amicus report stated many people doing research into the lands. And the conclusion to that amicus leaves us all seeing that this was all a bunch of smoke and mirrors that went on in the day where we were not occupying a particular land. Squatters went on, moved in, settled in, and basically stayed. And then the government came along because they wanted their settlers to be able to pay them a fee, basically, to keep the government running. So they started putting out what's called a fee simple. And they were saying to the settlers, look, you pay the taxes on this fee simple and the land is yours. We'll make sure that nobody bothers you. And that's exactly what went on. In a nutshell, every case is different. There's so much research that has been done that this in fact, backs it up. Now, I'm not saying that we want all the land where people are living. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a fair shake. When you talk about 98% of all the land is underlying title Crown, that's nonsense. We have never sold these lands. We've made agreements about sharing them, yes. And that's to our detriment. But the fact is, this is not a fair deal. It never has been. The government still operates under this umbrella of terra nullius, doctrine of discovery. It's just made up its own UNDRIP. And now we have CANDRIP. And it's not. Why did it need to be revised? It took 22 years to develop UNDRIP. And now, by the swish of a pen, say, no, we don't want that part. We don't like the wording in this. We've changed this, we've changed this, we've changed this. Because it doesn't align with the Constitution. That's because it doesn't align with human rights. That's why it doesn't fit. That's why they had to make CANDRIP. This is 2021. Why is there this racism still going on today? And that's basically what we're saying. You know, look at what happened on the East Coast as well with the fisheries agreements that were made, and everybody's squawking, burning down, you know, burning up boats and destroying fish and making a big hullabaloo because they don't want to honor their promise. It was a fair agreement. It was an agreement. And it can't be held. The same thing is going on here at Six Nations. The same thing is going on out west. And out west is a unique story as well. They had agreements too. All of those agreements are being broken as well. And they're getting away with it. Why? Because they promised the Canadian people, oh, it's all in the name of development. It's all in the name of having jobs, you know, or creating employment. Those jobs are all going to dry up as soon as that pipeline is done. Way less than 5% of all the people that they said they're going to hire are going to have permanent jobs. They're all temporary jobs. And pipelines always leak. Always. Money should be going into upgrading these pipes before they start building new ones. And don't forget the tar sands are very corrosive oil. And so those pipes are not going to last that long. And there's going to be more disaster. And it's not going to be sustainable. You know, we look around today, we see what we see. We see that a virus has literally brought this entire earth to a halt. It's causing hardships everywhere. It's not very long in the future that we're going to see shortages of food. And more prophecy will become known because things are out of balance. The animals are telling us it's out of balance. We see it's out of balance. This is a living virus. Whether it was manipulated or not, it's still a living virus, a mutated virus, and it's going to keep on mutating. And when we talk about traditional knowledge, Our traditional knowledge tells us all about this. It warned us about this. And it's showing us that what we need to do is we need to reclaim everything that we have lost as original people. And reconciliation is not a one-way street. This has to do with we as original people, we're dealing with this trauma. This trauma is going on today, just like it started, 150 years ago. Reburying children that we knew were lost. Now I want to tell you a little story about how everyone is affected. I heard the news and I knew about Kamloops back in 2007. We couldn't do anything about it then. And same thing here at Six Nations. What we call the mush hall, the residential school. We know that there's burials there too, unmarked graves. We also have missing records.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know who they are because children were sent here from all over the place. And I missed there was a gathering last Saturday at the mush hall. And I missed that one because I had other commitments. And on Sunday, caregiver came down and took my son out for a change of pace. And he called me around 1 o'clock and he says, did you know what's going on down at Chiefswood Park? Not Chiefswood Park, the Memorial Park in Breitenschwegen, middle of our territory. I said, no. He says, they're going to have a get together there too with some people doing speeches. He says, how about we meet there? And I said, okay, that's fine. So I went down there and we heard a few speeches. Now, my boy, he's special needs. And sometimes it's hard to know exactly how much he understands. Well, as we're listening to these speeches, this is how my son learned about 215 children that were buried of our people. And he turned around and gave me the biggest hug ever. And it made me think of all of those families that didn't get a chance to hug their children. And boy, did it hit me. It hit me hard. That's when I broke down and I didn't know that I was affected that much. As an individual, never been to residential school. And yet, it's real. This isn't over yet. And that's just about the damage that's been done. It's just about the damage as original people that we carry. And nobody knows that. Nobody knows what that's like to live with that every day. And when we see like these children now being found, in one way it's a relief, and the other way it opens up that wound again. It opens up the wound for all of this injustice that has gone on in this country that's looked up to. What a proud legacy this is. And this is not just something that happened in history. It's going on right now, and it's real. And it's not right. In our way of thinking, in our language, we have no word for a problem. So I wouldn't call this a problem. This is we say we have concerns, and we say, is something right or is it proper? And the fact is, I don't see it right, and I don't see it proper. And no apology in the world is ever going to make that right. What is going to make it right is action.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not telling non-Native people how to run their ship or how to run their government or how to run their religions. But what I am saying is you best get proper and you'd best do it correctly. You'd best do the just thing. And is this morally correct? Not in my opinion. And this situation is going on right now. We literally have hundreds of thousands of parents, grandparents, and this is what we have to tell our children. This is the truth. And how do we deal with that? How do we encourage them to say, it's all right, things are going to be better tomorrow? Well, the fact is, unless it changes today, tomorrow is always going to be tomorrow. That never comes. Because today, oh, we'll do that tomorrow. Oh, we'll figure it out tomorrow. No, you won't. Deal with it today. It's today that's going to bring a better future. And it's not only going to bring a better future for us as original people, it's going to bring a better future for you as moral people, as proud people, because we haven't lost our pride, not as original people. We're just now starting to hold our heads up high again, because we are who we are. We're people, just like everyone else. Color of your hair, color of your skin, color of your eyes, doesn't matter. We're all people underneath that. We all have blood running through our veins. We all have feelings. And we all deserve to be treated properly. And the only way to do that is that you have a responsibility to treat other people properly and to correct injustice, to make it right. Not to keep the spoils of your grandparents. It's not what it's all about. It's about sharing. And so we don't tell you either how your morals should be. You should be able to understand that for yourself. Because all of these things need to be put into perspective. So when they're in perspective, then we can do what we've always said that we wanted to do. Go peacefully, in coexistence, down this river of life, respecting each other's ways, religions, ways of being, ways of understanding. It's all about respect. It's all about relationship. And so I don't know how much time I have today. Maybe Grandmother Renee can jump in with a few things, or maybe talk about something I didn't talk about. There's plenty.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. It's I think it would take a couple more sessions to share the truth. And we mean to discourage you. We just want healing to happen. When truth comes, we have to look at ourselves. Am I following my original instructions? All of us have been given original instructions, and we all come from that place of sacredness, but along the way we have forgotten. And so all we ask is taking this time. This is why the pandemic came, was to help us to look within ourselves And look at all the things that we have taken for granted. And a lot of it was lies. And what is happening to us is going to soon happen to all of you. It's going to happen. Your homes, your belongings, that's going to happen. And so we need to come together. And truth is going to set us free. How many of you heard that? Truth is going to set us free. And we're going to come together. We're going to stand together because you've also been hurt. You've also had loss. You've also had injustice done. And so we ask that at this time, there's a commonality. And we're, as you say, today we have our awakened to truth. Yes, it is hard, but that is how it's a reality check we have to fix once in a while. I know there is but much heaviness right now, but with that, we offer healing. Every one of us deserves that healing of that lost spirit. And that's what we're here today, is a continuation to support you and to help you to understand that we cannot continue to live the life of lies. That, you look around and you see injustice. And it's so nice that our young people are standing up. Our people are coming together of all many different nationalities and color because we've all had injustice. And so today is a good day. You know what our people would say it? They would all say, it is a good day to die. Because we have, as we said, we have received what the Creator had intended us to do, was an understanding, and that is truth. I have seen truth, I am truth, and I will be truth. That is all of us. That's all of us. That's our original instruction, is to walk in that good way, having a good mind. And that's what we were told, that we would be here to remind the people. And we would come together, relight that fire that had gone out. Because that's why there's violence today. That's why there's so much pain in our community, is because many of the fires have gone out. They're only, as they say, they're only thinking. They have forgotten how to feel. And so I know many of you are touched by these words, and you are looking for an answer. Well, just take a deep breath. And that's what the peacemaker said. I will be with a breath away. And so when you take that deep breath, it brings back your original instructions on how to be, how to live in truth, how to walk in truth, and how to see truth. That is all we're asking for each of us, is to light your fire of truth. That's what it meant, the lighting of the eighth fire. When we come here today to support that new fire that is to be. Everybody talks about, oh, I want it to return back to normal. Well, that's not normal. Our children being violated. It's not normal, so much crime. It's not normal to have murders happening several times during the day. It's not normal to have children taken away still today. It's not normal. What is normal is what's looking us in the face today. We're feeling it. And we have to feel this pain so that we can walk together. And that's why the Creator, He gave us this pain. When you feel that pain in your heart, the injustice, it is to teach us that we're all feeling that pain. And when we feel that pain, we come together. We come and we stand together to overcome the lies that we have been programmed daily. We have It's been so sad to hear, that there is so much violence every day. And to hear the news about the destruction of our mother, the earth. You are feeling it just like we are. What are your children going to do when you have water like we have on our reserve? Where you won't be able to stand in a shower because it's so contaminated with chemicals. What are you going to do when there's nothing on the table? That's what's coming because we're not, we want it hot, hot, hot all the time, but everything has to have that balance. This rain was meant for all of us. It is to bring healing. That's what it's doing right now. And we're very, very, very blessed to have this rain today because a lot of us have been having triggers and setbacks because of loss of children. So it's just like the tears, the water that comes. It is to renew our life because Monday will be one day that we were given to celebrate being Indigenous, to remind the people of walking in truth. Because the land speaks to us, the animal speaks to us, creation speaks to us, the wind, all these things speak to us, that we must stand together and hold up our heads again and be accountable. What am I doing? Am I wasting water? Do I care more for the material things than what the necessity of life? The trees. You see, we need those trees. And there's so much more. There is so much more that we're coming to. And so we're very grateful for having you sit with us. But we also want you to know that we are all loved by Creator.
Mm-hmm.
We are all loved. And so we need to stand together. And yes, that pain is here. But now I want you to put your hand over your heart and take some deep breath. Because we all need to mend because of the injustice that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
You are feeling this too with us. And so we ask, just take some deep breath and then visualize that those tears and that the heart is going to speak now. And it's going to speak for all the future coming generations. We need to make things right with ourselves. We need to make things, as they say, make things right. And we have to start with ourselves. Am I walking in truth? And so when you feel that truth on your heart, it heals you. It makes you stronger. It makes you resilient. And so I say, Yawagoa, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yawa, for reminding us. Because we need to be reminded. We have to be humble
Mm-hmm.
in order to come back and stand upright again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say, Nyawa, Miigwech, and thank you, every one of you, for being with us, for taking this time to know that we can light this fire together.
Mm-hmm.
And we are here together. Uh-huh.
Oh,
Thank you so much. And you raised so many things for me as well, listening, and just knowing that we are standing each other up, we're right beside each other, and not to get into each other's canoe. Because we have, like you said, that we have the ways of knowing of how we're supposed to lead, with everybody being fed, everybody has a place to live, and nobody is going hungry. And something is somewhere along the line, those things got messed up. But it's always such a wonderful pleasure to be in your presence. I learned so much, even in an hour and 20 minutes, that I go and take an awful lot of this away and just really sit on it all weekend. And I'm just so honored and humbled to be in the presence of both you. So thank you so much for being here with us today. and have a lovely weekend until we see each other again. And you're right, this is going to be more discussions along what we were talking about today. Thank you, and Miigwech, and everybody have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Come on, go ahead.